art students! Today I'm going to go over some watercolor pencil tips and techniques. To get started, get a container of watercolor pencils for your table, a water container, one per person, and a couple of different sized brushes. Watercolor brushes are very fluffy at the tip and should come to a point like this. Please use a handheld sharpener. One of the cool things about watercolor pencils is that you can change the color by layering one color on top of another, like so. To apply them, you use them just like you would normal colored pencils, but then you're going to dip your brush in the water to activate the paint. If you want to create an ombre effect like what I have here, start with one side of the watercolor pencil color. So here I've got the darker side that I've got going on. Then I'm going to wash my brush and then finish painting this going in the opposite direction so that I maintain that ombre effect. I'm going to wipe off my brush a little bit just to make sure I don't have too much water on it. And then I'm going to paint just in the opposite direction there. And then I've got actually quite a bit of leftover paint down here that I can push around to the bottom to continue to fade that out so that I've got that nice effect. One of the things to keep in mind with watercolor pencil is that you don't want to put wet paint next to wet paint, because if you do, it will bleed. So watch what happens here when I fill in this area next to the wet paint with blue, and then I get that wet. That water is going to want to merge with the other water that's up next to it, and then look at what happened. Ugh, it's bleeding and feathering. Not great. We want to prevent that from happening with this part of our project. So to do that, you want to paint one area and then skip over to another area. So just like this. I want to paint not right next to it, but one over. Another thing to avoid is dipping your brush into wet paint like this. When you're doing that, you're actually scrubbing the paper, and if you're not careful, you could scrub a hole right through. Please don't ever dip your watercolor pencil into the water itself either, because that will ruin it. Now, another thing to think about is to make sure you're using the right sized brush for the job. So if you have a small area like this, you don't want to use a giant brush because you're going to get too much water on that area. See how it's pooling like that? That's not great, because if I go and try to lift my paper, that water is going to run all over the place. So I'm just going to lift or dab up that extra paint and water with my paper towel, wait for it to dry, and then I can add some more color to it later. Then I'll go on to another area. Now, if you have a background design like this where you have lots and lots of space in between little details, the best strategy is to take a large brush and to tackle the large areas first. So when you have something like this that you're doing, you want to think of working big to small. And you want to use a big brush on the big areas and then switch to a small brush to get into the nooks and crannies. What's cool about doing this is that if I accidentally get a little bit of yellow paint on one of these flowers, it's not a big deal, because I know that once the paint dries, I can actually go over it when I paint the flowers and I won't even notice it. So here I am using that small brush to get into all of those little details. Now please, please, please don't ever scrub your brush like that. It's very harmful to your brush and it will actually ruin it. Please make sure you have enough water on your brush at all times to maintain a nice flow of water and paint. It'll make painting go a lot easier for you. So now that the background of this is dry and all that yellow paint is finished, I can start painting all of these flowers and I don't have to worry about anything bleeding.